the United Nations, the IPCC, the International, or what is it, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There we go. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Just issued a new report today. It just came out. They're saying we have a choice here to act, and at the same time, they're kind of saying we have no choice. We must act. Leslie Hughes, a former IPCC author, the director of the Australia-based Climate Council, said, predictions are now becoming observations. The gap between where we are and where we need to go is increasing rather than decreasing. CO2 emissions, now this is from the report itself, CO2 emissions have shattered records once again, from apocalyptic flooding in Pakistan to deadly drought in East Africa. They continue to mount. This is the sixth report that was issued today. Hugely profitable global fossil fuel giants are planning to expand their operations in coming years. The industry has refused to commit to align its business model with what the IPCC says is necessary. They would rather have money than have a living planet. And according to this report, quote, this is verbatim from the report, climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. The choices and actions implemented in this decade will have impacts now and for thousands of years. They note that the world must phase out coal, oil, and gas, that fish populations are dwindling, farms are less productive, infectious diseases have multiplied, and weather disasters are escalating to unheard of extremes. More than 40% of all carbon emissions from human sources have happened since 1990, just in the last 33 years. 40%. We've been burning carbon fuels, in an aggressive way for about 200 years. The wealthiest 10% of people on the planet generate 3 times as much pollution as the poorest 50%. Electricity from renewable sources like solar and wind is now cheaper than fossil fuels, but that's not stopping the fossil fuel companies. And from distilled.earth, which does publishes a great newsletter by Michael Thomas over on Substack, some kind of good news about last week's climate news. San Francisco Bay Area regulators approved a plan to ban the sale of gas furnaces and water heaters starting in 2027. The share of Americans alarmed about climate change has gone from 12% to 26% over the last 10 years. Energy storage capacity is expected to grow by 6 times over the next 5 years. That's 600%. Floating solar could generate as much as 1/3 of global electricity and prevent evaporation in reservoirs, according to a new report. Meanwhile, Texas Republicans have introduced a series of bills to slow the growth of renewable energy and prop up natural gas in that state. One of the world's largest clean energy manufacturers announced they will build the world's largest solar factory in China. The Biden administration plans to approve new California rules that will cut pollution from diesel trucks and accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. A new Dutch pro-farmer party swept elections last week, putting the Prime Minister's plan to cut nitrogen emissions at risk. So it's kind of good news, bad news, good news. Coal use is expected to peak globally next year. Americans, if we just cut back on fossil fuel use, Americans could save $190 billion in healthcare costs because our lungs are being damaged by the stuff coming out of this. By 2030, the share of clean electricity in America could be 80 to 90%. Could rise by as much as 80 to 90%. I think right now it's around 12%. 11 to 18,000 air pollution related deaths could be averted if we just cut back on fossil fuels. So, it's interesting. It's like they say, we live in interesting times. And this is definitely one of them.